This recording has got nothing to do with me. I'm going back to editing.
Go on then. See ya.
I can't just leave you, can I?
Well, if you want to be useful, see if you can get some more downloads. What's wrong with people? Can't you get them to download the podcast?
I don't know. We keep asking. Something to do with a flooded marketplace.
Something to do with a flooded marketplace?
Well, I don't know.
Exactly. I'll give up on you, Richard. Now, Giles. Look at Giles. Giles is asking the right sort of question.
Oh, thank you.
Why are they downloading other podcasts?
1 minute you're worried about our podcast, the next it's all the other podcasts.
Well, never underestimate the competition. Competing is very important.
Podcast scan complete.
Well, who are they?
They are nothing.
Huh? What does that mean?
They are nothing.
Well, you mean they don't show up in iTunes?
They have no identification.
But everyone's registered. We have a directory for the entire podverse.
They are nothing.
What? They don't exist? Not anywhere?
They are nothing.
Well, we all know what happens to non-entities. They get promoted. Stick them on the featured podcast page. Here we go. iTunes, podcast directory, ratings and site layout.
This is ridiculous. You've got access to the iTunes core. You can look at the whole history of films and TV in their archive, and you're looking at podcasts.
But there's something wrong.
I suppose.
Why? What is it?
The podcast rating system is working flat out, channeling massive amounts of bot traffic.
All the way from the dark web.
The dark web?
Yeah, something out there is generating vast amounts of spurious ratings.
Well, I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm missing out on a party. It's all dependent on iTunes. Can't we get featured?
You can't. You need an invitation with a key.
Oh, keys are just codes, and I've got the codes right here. Here we go. Override 215.9.
How come it's given you the code?
Suddenly, someone up in iTunes likes us.
Hello and welcome to Something Who Podcast, episode 27. Back again after just a fortnight this time. It's another episode in our classic format where we compare a story from the original series with one from the new. And today it's all about making our way to the top as we bring you our thoughts on the 7th Doctor story Paradise Towers, followed by the 9th Doctor tale The Long Game. And here to talk about these two stories are two friends of mine who are no strangers to life at the top. It's Paul.
Yeah, hi.
I'm Giles.
Build high for happiness.
It sounded like an amazing compliment. I just have no idea what you meant.
So before we kick off, I'd just like to mention the Sirens of Audio podcast, who invited me on a recent episode to discuss 8th Doctor Big Finish Audio Neverland. So thanks for that, Dwayne. And I think it's high time you had Paul on the show, as he's our resident Big Finish author.
Oh, okay.
Let's see. Also, last week we heard that Phantom had been dealt a financial blow by their wholesalers. And, I mean, the three of us have all attended Phantom events. And they also produce a good range of audios and books. So I'd like to recommend to our listeners that they go and buy something from them to keep their business going.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll second that. Great bunch of lads.
Anyway, let's start our episode with Paradise Towers, which was written by Stephen Wyatt, directed by Nicholas Mallet. It's the second story of season 24 and the first one that Andrew Cartmel had an input to.
Indeed.
Who wants to kick us off?
Awkward silence.
I'm holding the silence to see what happens.
Okay, I'll go. I remember being quite embarrassed by this at the time, because I think I kind of built up the idea that, okay, there was going to be four episodes of Time in the Rani to get through, and then the new thing was going to be upon us. And then the first episode was, although I didn't mind the storytelling style in some ways, I think things like the Kangs and so on will immediately have me metaphorically wanting to, crawl behind the sofa and cringe a little bit in that self-conscious teenage way that one has before one gets used to the idea that it's a kids' show and the silliness is all part of it. But coming back, obviously it's not one I've kept a distance from in the past, but coming back, I liked it. I tend to like it more on each viewing, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I can appreciate more of what they were going for and be a bit more forgiving of some of the failures. I think as a first stab at Cartmel era Doctor Who, it shows quite a bit of of what's the promise of what's to come.
That's not a million miles away from the way I feel. Yeah, it's a shame we haven't got a young person on here who can watch this. I mean, it wouldn't have to be any younger than we were when we saw it, but the point was not just that we might have been teenagers who took the programme a bit more seriously than perhaps we should have done, because maybe all teenagers do that, but we didn't have a precedent for this, did we? We thought, it was so wonderful for all those preceding generations, and now what's happened to it? What's happened to the magic of Doctor Who, we said, for the first time ever. Nobody had ever said that before. But now, these modern fans come to it with a much wider... This all exists. This is all part of the fabric of Doctor Who. It's even wider tonally than it was back then, so they don't have to worry about being embarrassed by it. They can enjoy it and think, that's what this era was like, is it? That's good, that's great. And I gather they're very well adjusted and happy people as a result. No, I was the same. On the other hand, a lot of my feelings haven't changed that much. And in a sense, I don't need to feel embarrassed about it, because I did make the effort to watch the documentary, and of course the people involved in production didn't think it was an unqualified success. And so a lot of the things that I wasn't sure about it then, that I'm still not 30 years later, the writer and the script editor felt the same. So I think what has changed for me is an appreciation of the script is a lot better written than I realised. Would I speak for all of us in thinking that at the time we might have thought this was a script that had more potential in it than was realised on screen?
Yeah.
I think that's an obvious thing to say about it, but I mean, I actually now look at the script and think this is terrific. Particularly the first episode. I thought it was very tightly written and set out its all very well the first 25 minutes, and then wasn't quite as tight either as the structure of the plotting or the dialogue wasn't quite as good in the other three, and I wasn't surprised to see Stephen White explain that A, he was making it up as he went along, and B, he wrote the second 3 episodes very, very quickly. That seemed pretty obvious. But I could see through all that, and I enjoyed this type of Doctor Who. It's got some things in common with one of my favourite eras, season 17. I don't know if I've ever mentioned that before. But also has something new to it, doesn't it? It's not just comic.
Might be a more comic book.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that, but you see, that's what everyone said about it at the time. But I wasn't familiar enough with comic books to know what they meant. I suppose the stylised nature of it.
Yes.
It is. I think in season 17, it's just very funny at times, but it's just a layer of humour, of wit in the dialogue mostly, layered on top of quite traditional plots. Whereas what's happening in this era is Andrew Cartmel is encouraging his writers to look at his favourite comic books, and whether they do or not, he's encouraging them to... He's somehow getting their minds into that mindset. I mean, this wasn't specifically inspired by comic books, it was inspired by J.G. Ballard.
Highways, yes.
And possibly also Brazil, which Andrew Cartmel seems to realise as it's put to him in the middle of the DVD documentary.
It must have a bit of 2000 AD in there, though, surely.
The very fact that they're drawing from J.G. Ballard rather than... I mean, Doctor Who's always drawn from all sorts of places, but it's not often drawn from great literature or cult literature. It's often drawn from sci-fi basics and Hammer horror films and much more obvious sources. No, it's not often stepped far enough away from the low-hanging fruit of similar genres. So that's one thing I like about it. And I suppose it is that stylisation that's divided people, and maybe still divides people. Not all the characters are easy to identify with. Some of them are so stylised. And the same thing is true in Greatest Show in the Galaxy. It's very entertaining to watch. They all fit together and very nicely as a piece of fiction. They're all in character as fictional constructs, but how many of them make us feel as people? And I think in both of Stephen White's stories, you can split the characters into the ones that you have some hope of identifying with, and the ones that are simply there for you to think, oh, that's clever. That's quite funny, and that's quite clever, well done. But I don't mind that as a style, once in a while. Am I making any sense?
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
No, I mean, So I mean, I think my initial viewing of it was a bit more positive than either of you two. I mean, I think what happened was, I'm not sure I saw it immediately it went out, because I was at university at the time. I think I probably saw it a bit after, and I might have seen all of the episodes fairly close together. I think, like you say, with Time in the Rani, that was an endurance, and I think I saw in this that whilst it wasn't brilliant, it had the seed of something that made it worth watching other Doctor Who in the series. It wasn't, I wasn't going to give up on it entirely. So I cut it quite a lot of slack for that reason. I mean, the acting's very uneven, I think, is what I spotted this time. There's quite a lot of sort of children's TV style acting going on. And there's also quite a lot of rhubarbing going on. There's in the Kang, the Red Kangs only have 2 speaking actors and then a bunch of bit parts, and it's sort of the same all the way through. But I mean, it's a fantastically huge cast, and it does give the sense that there are lots of people in this place, but yeah, not very many speakers among them. And I guess probably more than anything, it feels like a stage play as much as a television show.
Yeah. Yes, I shouldn't harp on too much about the difference about how I received it back then, because who on earth wants to know? I mean, I'm surprised anyone wants to know what I think now as a 40-something-year-old, but who wants to know what I was thinking when I was 16? I sure as eggs don't. But I remember thinking, it was another one of those sort of season 17, 18 things. A lot of people, clever people, knew that this was much better than the previous year or two, or whatever, depending on just how much you disliked the previous. It got very serious, very up itself, very continuity bound, very dry, very dull. And in almost every way, this was the most massive improvement in terms of imagination and ambition. But I guess, and I think I could tell it even then, but the point was, it was often spoiled by things that made you slightly embarrassed, made you cringe, as the young people say nowadays. And back then that meant more to me, that bothered me so much. And whether it's maturity or just distance, but I don't worry about all that now, and I can just enjoy it. And I do enjoy it a hell of a lot more than Terror of the Vervoids, for example. This is something new, not pastiche. I mean, the best of even Terror of the Vervoids is better than a lot of the stuff around it. At least it's pastiching something else. Half the time we were pastiching Doctor Who, and that's when you're in trouble. That's when it really is running dry. So I don't want to be too equivocal about it. I really do think it's a terrific story. It's just, I don't know, little things. Some of the actors, the costumes maybe aren't quite in sympathy. It would have looked much better if I think with the script being that stylised, there's an argument. I mean, I personally would think you shouldn't stylise everything else. So for me in particular, if the setting had been much more naturalistic, the sets are great, as everyone says on the documentary. I think the costumes fight against it. They look a bit Blake 7. There's various things that are wrong with them, but they're just too over-designed, too shiny and stylised, and just too clean.
I mean, I had this funny feeling when I watched it the first time that Richard Briers kind of wrecks it in episode 4 by kind of overacting. But I mean, on watching it this time, I actually thought, well, he's overacting from the first time you see him on screen, and actually, I mean, at least in episode 4, he's sort of doing zombie acting. I mean, it may not be very good, but I can sort of see what he's trying to do with it. And to some extent, it's almost better than the other stuff you get in the first 3 episodes, which is kind of, or at least that's less explicable, that he overacts it so much in the first 3 when he's just being, allegedly a normal person.
Yeah, that's an interesting hypothesis. You're wrong. He's not here. You don't need to do. He's not listening. You don't need to defend him. I when you watch that documentary, I'm not convinced I think he knows he was way over the top, and he's trying to convince himself that it was the right thing to do.
I really don't have a problem with it in the first 3 episodes. I think it fits right into the, as an interpretation. And was this around the time had ever decreasing circles started by now?
Yeah.
So that was
it's most of, yes, at least halfway through.
Yes, yeah. So obviously he had cultivated this prissy character.
I assume they were casting him to get Martin Bryce, because there's a lot of that. I'm not going to say unimaginative. There's a lot of that stereotyping people in this era, isn't there? They're often bringing people in to do your thing, do that thing you do, but in Doctor Who.
So I don't have a problem with that, and because the whole thing, as you say, the stylisation, it needs,
I agree. It's a terrific performance in the first 3 episodes, and Clive Merrison and he work very well together.
Yes,
They're playing it exactly as it's written. The argument really is about, and also I would say he's doing some very bad acting in the 4th episode. But the argument really is what should he have been doing? I might say, well, it would have been better if rather than raising the performance up to a higher pitch, he'd have toned it down and done something more sinister. But I don't know if it's supposed to be sinister. That's just my feeling that maybe Stephen White had something yet again in mind. I think something quieter and less ranty would have been an interesting contrast, but it's not. That's just one interpretation. He's still occasionally funny even in the 4th episode because he's Richard Briers. I mean, how could he not be? And do you think it's a story which, like a Donald Cotton or something, where the comedy is supposed to turn very dark at the end, do you think it is pitched that way on the page?
Interesting question.
I mean, I feel like the comedy's sort of run out really by the 4th episode, but
yes, it has, hasn't it? And it's not necessarily replaced with anything more interesting than just we've all got to work together, which is a running theme of the Cartmel years, isn't it?
Yes. Well, it's a fairly the comedy's fairly dark throughout, and I'd forgotten quite how blatant Tabby and Tilda is right from the beginning. I had sort of slightly misremembered that they started off as two nice old ladies who were helpful, and then gradually it dawns, but in fact it's entirely there from the it's entirely there from the moment they appear.
That tone is pretty unprecedented in all the previous 24 years of Doctor Who, isn't it? Characters like that who are just that's so large and so stylised and so unbelievable, but dramatically very valid and very entertaining and very well played. Again, the costumes. If it didn't look like Galloping Galaxies or whatever, then it would be. I'm assuming all of this was supposed to feel sinister rather than like a bit of a
CBBC production.
Yes. He doesn't say all that in the documentary, Stephen White, because he's too nice. He just hints that sometimes things weren't quite as he'd pictured them. But I'm assuming almost everything wasn't quite as he'd pictured it. But I mean, he would have been happy to have these great actors doing his dialogue justice. But with just a slight tweak of the tone in the makeup, the costumes, the lighting, you could have had something where the contrast between the humour and the horror of this situation, not just the individual moments of horror, the various ingenious deaths and so on, but just the general horror of the atmosphere could have been much, much stronger. Has anyone here read High Rise, by the way?
No.
I hate to be the guy who says I've seen the film.
Yeah, well, so have I, but I can't remember enough about it to. I was hoping somebody would know it well enough to make an informed comment on just how much he's borrowed.
You won't get an informed comment from me.
It would be very off-brand, wouldn't it, for having informed comment.
Ah, damn it.
I mean, I think the problem is that it's been made in the 1980s. That's how I feel about it. It's all a bit, there's just too much. They get to the top of the tower. It's all very 1980s. The Kangs are a bit, a 1980s pop video.
Yep.
It just feels like it's too obvious where it was made.
I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because a Doctor Who's always of its era, isn't it? But somehow, when we look back on the stories that look very 60s or 70s, it doesn't often seem to ruin a story in a way that looking a bit too 80s does.
And some of it works very well, though. I mean, the bit where the Doctor's watching the promotional video for Paradise Towers, and you've got those sort of 80s video production values on the promotional film. Is great, and that's a whole other level of with the somewhat dry voiceover. Come to Paradise Towers, sort of adds another level to it.
I think the Kang's the biggest disappointment design-wise because they are. I think they're probably supposed to be younger, although that's not necessarily a problem because if they were children when the adults disappeared, and they could well be women in their mid to late 20s. Who act like children. That's not necessarily a problem. That could have been quite disturbing. But unfortunately, what we get is women in their mid-20s who act like posh actresses in their mid-20s. No, actually, I'll tell you what. The problem is, I don't want to pick on anyone, but Turlough's missus, who plays the
Julie Brennan,
Is she Fire Escape? Anyway, whatever. She is the weakest. She's a good actress, but she's not. I never believe for a second that she's anyone other than the actress Julie Brennan. All the others managed to. She's just acting too much. She's too posh. She's too precise. She doesn't convince me that she's not. I feel like she's acting down, whereas the others somehow. And Catherine Cusack in her first television appearance, I think, is very naturalistic. I was watching her in a much smaller part. I believed her.
Yeah.
I believe that she had been stuck in this place for the last 20 years, and this is all she's known. And she was talking in the documentary about how she was a bit embarrassed and had trouble getting her tongue round these ridiculous neologisms. But it doesn't show. And I can't help thinking that might explain why she's had a longer, more successful career in television. I don't want to be rude about the others, but I think you can tell from this. She gets her head around this difficult part in a way that not all of them do. And but putting those silly wigs on them, I mean, it just takes you out of the moment, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If they looked feral, I don't like to harp on production values, but this is quite extreme. It's not a budgetary problem. I'm not criticising them for something that was out of their control because they couldn't have done it better. They could have done it better. It was an artistic choice to make it look glam and shiny, and it's just not what is required, is it? It doesn't fit with the set either.
Well, this is the thing.
Nowadays, in the era of tone meetings, you'd have everything would be on the same page.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've forgotten how at times it's very well directed. You get some interesting camera moves and stuff going on. And I've forgotten it was Nicholas Mallard, and obviously he then went on to knock it out the park with Fenrig.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this is the thing, he just didn't quite have everything, didn't have quite all the stars aligning in the same direction on this one. But it's funny, there are certain elements that are there, and I don't know how much choice, I don't know how much control really the directors had back in the 80s.
No.
I've never had the impression that auteur theory really applied to Doctor Who unless you had possibly, I guess someone like Graham Williams might have been enough of a force of nature that he could get everyone going along the same lines, but sometimes you certainly seem to have
Graham Harper?
Sorry, yes, I do mean Graham Harper. You sometimes had someone like Graham Harper who maybe was enough of a force of nature to impose his ideas onto and get other people fired up in the different departments, but in other cases you certainly had, you get mismatches where you have great sets and then the costumes go awry, or or the lighting goes off and good costumes and the lighting's off and so on. And this seems to be it. That I think the costume choice is probably the thing. The costume and makeup combined are probably the thing that's letting the side down, coupled with some of the performances. I quite like Binliner as well, actually, and I think
she's good.
She does a pretty good job of it as well.
Yeah, no, it really was mostly. I mean, despite what I said, I actually do have it in for Julie Brennan. She ruined this. Why couldn't she look around at what all her colleagues were doing? No, sorry. Oddly enough, on the documentary, the only production point I remember Stephen Wyatt picking up on is not one that actually bothered me over much, but perhaps he'd been too polite to mention the others. He picks up on the fact that the actors playing the caretakers should have been older, more unfit, less physically. They would have been the men who were left behind, who weren't fit to go off to war. He wanted
Dad's Army,
basically a lot of rather old, fat, infirm-looking men. And Dad's Army, that would have been great. And somebody didn't pick up on that. Maybe didn't think to put it in the script. I don't know. Nobody asked him. But that's an interesting point.
They're sort of playing the people who are too stupid to go to war, aren't they?
Yes, they're playing that. Yeah, which is why it didn't bother me. Actually, it didn't occur to me at any point that that was breaking the spell. Yes, and there's quite a nice background mugging.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
The lead stupid caretakers.
Yeah, on a similar vein, don't we have in terms of like disagreements with, or points that have been raised? Didn't they cast Pex against what Stephen Wyatt was anticipating? Because Pex wanted him to be a Stallone type.
Yes, yeah. Stephen Wyatt says that he understands why that they did audition loads of, well, whether it's true or not, they tried to find a Stallone type, and none of them were funny. All the people who looked right weren't funny, so they went with somebody who could play it properly. Yeah,
because I think Howard Cook's great in this. Yeah.
He also magnanimously says that if they had cast a Stallone type, it would have looked ridiculous with that person standing next to Bonnie Langford throughout the entire thing. But I don't know whether that looked funny. I don't know.
I thought Stallone was short.
Fair point.
Oh,
he didn't say Stallone type. That was Giles.
So yes, right. It was me, but someone muscle bound and
maybe a Dolph Lundgren type. Maybe a Hulk Hogan type. A Giant Haystacks type. A Michael Kilgareth type. Stephen Thorne type.
Bernard Bresslaw type. No.
I nearly said that, and I thought,
now you could be talking.
Paul, you've run this joke into the ground.
Yeah.
And now you get to cap it.
At the start of this, I noticed the Doctor says about Paradise Towers, it won awards in the 21st century.
He did say that, didn't he?
It's classic late 20th century that you sort of feel like so long as it's another century, anything could happen. And yet now it sort of feels odd that they would have said it so not very far in the future.
Indeed. And of course, while there's nothing particularly, depending on how you look at it, particularly futuristic about it, brackets, apart from the fact that they were able to keep the Croagnon's consciousness alive outside his body, I suppose. But, we'll forgive that. But it would have to be on a very one of the earliest Earth colonies. Did we even have Earth colonies in the 21st century, Richard?
What, elsewhere in Doctor
Who? No, I was assuming you'd gone forward in time to the end of the century to check this for me.
Yeah, I'm not expecting it to happen.
No. Yeah. Talking of how this is a new era for Doctor Who in terms of approach, what was the big first about this? Was the first story where they just arrive randomly? No, it's not random, is it? Because they choose to go there. There's something about it. Is it the first story that didn't have any continuity elements? Not a single returning character or element or reference or anything for a very, very, very long time. I think it was hailed as such back in the day.
Yeah.
And whereas we might be thinking that Cartmel went out of his way to do that, what he actually did is prove that it's very easy to do that. It's more effort to burden these things with continuity. When you bring in new writers, they should be creating new worlds.
Yeah, well, for 18 or 19 years, Doctor Who never really bothered with continuity, did it? And then suddenly it arrived by the ladleful.
So, having been watching a lot of 60s Who for my other podcast, It is reminiscent of those glorious early days when you never knew what was around the corner. Just a bit sillier. What do we think of McCoy here? Because I was still getting used to his acting, because it was, quite a break from the sort of actors we'd had in the role before. But watching it with hindsight, he seemed, and in fact on the documentary I think one of them says that they thought Sylvester was still feeling his way, but I thought, wow, this is his doctor, this is... I was thinking, it never really gets any better than this, in a good way. That sounds bad. I was thinking, all the marvellous new ideas he brought to the role are here.
Yeah, it's pretty fully formed, doesn't it?
Inverted commas, darkness and sinister sides that he added later on aren't here. But I mean, that's not really for me, despite a decade of new adventures, that's not really for me the essential Seventh Doctor. This is him here. And I find it all a lot more charming than I think I did as a teenager. From the moment he steps out the TARDIS and tries to have a conversation with a drinks fountain or whatever it is. It's terrific. And he holds his own against all these great actors. He's very good in the scene when he's tricking the two caretakers.
Yeah, that's
very
a highlight.
subtle performance of that. And it's a bit like he gets given a lot of quiet scenes like that later on. Normally with a slightly more serious edge, like the gun scene.
Yes,
in the Happiness Patrol that everyone always goes on about. But he's showing what he can do even this early on.
Yeah, he's got that nice wistfulness and thoughtfulness at various moments.
So when he always used to say, and still says, that he didn't know what he was doing in season 24 and he just was thrown in the deep end and was swimming and falling back on what he knew, how to be clownish, it just doesn't show here. That's only really referring to time in the Rani, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it may, of course, in most things, the first few weeks you do something seem to last forever, and then everything kind of telescopes up after that. So I wonder if he's remembering those first few weeks in Time in the Rani and thinking it lasted rather longer than it did.
Well, it must have felt like a lifetime for everyone involved in the bloody thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, really the only bit that I find frustrating is when at the end of episode 3 he gets captured by the cleaner. It's a bit like the Dragonfire cliffhanger. That he goes out of his way to be sort of grabbed by it. But apart from that, and if that's not his fault, that's the weakness of the script.
Several other actors have been put through that mill previously, haven't they?
Yes, yeah.
I would talk about what we think Stephen Moffat's signature style is, but Stephen Moffat.
Your turn.
I'm doing it again. I would talk about what we think Graham Williams. I would talk more about Stephen Wyatt's right style, but that would involve talking about both his stories, and we shouldn't really get ahead of ourselves, should we? But sticking mostly to this, and we're touching on Greater Show if you must, what do you think Stephen Wyatt brings to the table?
Well, I think it's what you were talking about earlier. It's figures that are larger than life, that have, I suppose, a spark of something you might have seen elsewhere, but are sort of amplified to the point where they become slightly caricatured.
I think a lot of the writers of the Cartmel shows had worked in theatre, hadn't they?
Yeah.
They certainly haven't worked in television very much. I think because Stephen Wyatt's script Claws, which I remember, did anyone see that at the time? Had been submitted to the BBC, which is what Cartmel saw, but hadn't been produced yet. I think came.
Right.
I think it came on the year after.
Yeah. I mostly know Wyatt these days. He seems to have done quite a lot of Dickens adaptations of lesser-known Dickens stuff that sometimes comes up on Radio 4 Extra and things like that. And I think there's something Dickensian maybe it's because you've seen actresses like, who is it who plays Tabby?
Brenda Bruce.
Judy Cornwell.
It's
Elizabeth Spriggs. Yes. Who, of course, later played Mrs. Gamp in Chuzzlewit.
Ah, yes.
Which maybe is making me make that connection that, there's a lot of that, but that largeness of character. It's interesting because he doesn't exactly deal in incredibly complex plots in either of his stories, I don't think, really. I confess to not having seen Greater Show in longer than I care to remember, and that's just more by accident than anything. But in this case, as you say, there's a stylisation, and It's more interesting in the incident as it goes along, because the actual plot isn't.
No.
The actual plot of this is pretty is pretty trite, but you just have a lot of fun along the way.
I've always been a big fan of Greatest Show, and I think watching this again, it's cemented my feeling that Greatest Show works better as a piece of television. But it's almost entirely because the production is much more in sympathy with the script. The design, the direction in particular, which is extraordinary, matches his stylization, and that's what you have to look at to see what Paradise Towers could have been. I don't think it's as cohesive. Everything here is working. It's a completely cohesive environment, and everything fits nicely. Whereas Greatest Show is like a random bunch of ideas. It feels like a random bunch of ideas he's had, and he doesn't even go into any very great lengths to convince you that they aren't, because they are just a load of people who've arrived on this planet, aren't they? So it's there in plain sight. So I think this could have been even better if it had been directed by Alan Waring and the SWAT production teams. But I like his dialogue. I like his joy with words. It feels like a very long time since we've had that, and I'm sure people in Jane Baker would be saying, "Excuse me," if they were listening. But I mean, their joy with words is not. I think is a bit self-indulgent. It's the sort of joy with words that leaves everyone else out of the party.
It's not something that survives coming out of an actor's mouth.
No, no, indeed. Where for all their decades of experience in television, but I shouldn't be praising Stephen Wyatt by slagging off Biff and Jane Baker. It's very easy to do, and that's why I shouldn't be doing it. But I do think his dialogue is terrific, and I don't know why he's not been used more. I don't know why he's not been brought back to Modern Who. I would have brought him back just as readily as Rona Munro. Don't know why he's not done a big finish until this year.
It feels to me that the journey of both of his stories is the thing. I mean, the destination is kind of less interesting, but it's very interesting to see where it's going and along the way.
Yeah, and I think that's the last thing I'd want to say about Paradise Towers, because it possibly links with the long game. Is there some of the characters have a journey in this, and others seem to meander and go on dead ends and red herrings, and that's where I think you can tell that it hadn't been plotted very thoroughly in advance. I mean, I'm still slightly frustrated by the fact that Mel, even after she knows that very bad things are happening here, and that she's at the very least she's in danger, but she's supposed to be a companion of the Doctor. She should know that the companion's life is to help him save the day and right the wrongs. But she's obsessed with this bloody swimming pool, and it doesn't really make any sense on a character level or a plot level. But so that's slightly odd.
I think there's a line about her having arranged to meet him up there at some point. I think it's thrown away, or that's her. But I suspect maybe the other thing you're going to point out is when they get there, the fact that after all she's been through, threatened by cannibal lesbians who've been eaten by robot cleaners, etc., etc. She then goes, "Oh, let's get into I want to have a. I want to have a
it's
swim."
Not so much the getting up there as the extraordinary naivety.
Yes, and it's lovely. They must just make up all the stories to stop people from coming up here.
But then the robot crab thing isn't very impressive anyway. I mean, it doesn't feel like. I mean, maybe it might have killed her, but it doesn't feel like it's going to happen anytime soon.
No.
I don't know what anyone would expect when they write an underwater robot in Doctor Who. I don't know quite what you'd be expecting it to look like. But still, it's the writer's job to not rein in their imagination and everyone else to make it work for them, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you think it's slightly too long? I think it could have been a very, very tight three-parter. But something we used to argue about in those days. You didn't until season 24, because we didn't have three-parters before then. And suddenly it all became about, this one would have been better as 3, or that one was good, that three-parter could have been 4. And everyone would, well, maybe it's just in my circles, or in my head. But I remember a lot of arguing, or the toss over, 25 minutes here or there.
There was this thought, wasn't there, as you say, that the 4-parters were somehow better than the 3. and it did not really borne out particularly by the. Maybe it's just because those two at the end of this season aren't all that.
Take that back.
Yeah.
Well, at least where Delta's concerned, I was about to say it, and then because I was about to say with regard to my initial sheepishness or cringe factor, by the time we got to Delta and the Bannermen, I was completely on board and loving it, and thought, yeah.
Well, while we're still dipping back into our teenage memories, I thought this season, I remember distinctly thinking and telling everyone it got better with each successive story. But I don't know if I think that now. I sometimes look at it and think that Delta and the Bannermen is the most fully realised story, whatever that means. But going back to the idea of the journey and the environment, the towers, build high for happiness is the motto of the entire story. There's Mel's obsession with getting to the top, but the evil lives in the basement. But in general, there's no real differentiation between any of the 150 floors in between, is there?
Yeah.
It doesn't get worse as you go down or worse as you get up in particular. So that's why I think that contributes to the fact that the middle episodes feel quite meandering. The plot is progressing, but the geography of the tower isn't really adding to the plot.
No.
I don't think, apart from downwards.
Yeah.
I mean, when the fact that everyone's taken down into the basement, down either by the cleaners or straight down the chute.
Yeah, I mean,
It's leading us down to the cliffhanger in the part 3. But
is it obvious that that's where the cleaners are going? I must say that it's really only later in the story that it becomes clear to me that the cleaners are heading off down to the basement. The first few times I see it in this, it wasn't clear to me that that's where that was.
again, my research is lacking. One thing I remember from High Rise is that the vertical layout of the environment in the film and book High Rise is very important to the narrative, and that the class system that is a metaphor for, that is laid bare during the story, is entirely dependent on people wanting to get higher. And that's a fairly basic science fiction idea, isn't it? In dystopian futures, that the dregs of society live on the ground floor.
Yeah.
And the only way to raise yourself out of that is to get to the penthouse suite. It's interesting that that we don't really get much of that in Paradise Towers. It's not really interesting in using the verticality of its titular structure as any kind of metaphorical underpinning for the Enterprise.
Yeah, no, this is. I was actually going to bring up the question of whether is there much metaphor going on, and as you say, by the time you get to episode 4, the lesson that's being drawn seems like a fairly trite one of everyone should work together.
There isn't one that underpins everything, is there? No, it's just a little pinch of various different things. People descending into ferality and savagery and losing their humanity. It's just very basic themes like that.
Yeah,
but that
and you wonder whether there's a bit of a police state kind of thing going on with the caretakers, but they don't. The fact they all give their comedy Hitler salutes when all hail the great architect.
It's much more about the banality of evil, I thought, isn't it? Well, maybe that's taken too literally, but the fact that they're so utterly banal and rule-bound. I don't know how much of that Nazi imagery is in the scripts and how much was just in the design. I wouldn't have thought there was very much of that in the script at all. I don't think it's only obeying orders.
No. I mean, it's really the combination of the caps and the big poofy trousers. Airman trousers.
It's much more drawn from old British comic stereotypes of officious park keepers and little men.
Yes,
with
Blakey, isn't it?
In uniforms, exactly.
Yeah,
all the Blakeys have been left behind on the B Ark when everyone else went off to war.
Yeah, there's just that one scene or group of scenes where Mel's in the lift with Pex and they descend suddenly to the basement and then whiz afterwards straight back up to the top, which sort of puts the whole thing into some sort of perspective, but it feels like it's thrown away a bit.
I was thinking, is that the first place where the basement thing is mentioned properly? the fact it's forbidden. And we don't really find out anything more about the society from which they have come from on the outside. It feels like there's a although maybe that's a point that we don't know what happened in the war.
Deliberate.
Yeah.
I think if it had more time to write it, that we would have been able to read between the lines and discover more about the missing pictures of this jigsaw.
But I guess for 90 minutes or whatever, I mean, those titles do last for blinking ever, don't they? But so there's probably only about 90 minutes after you've snipped all that out, and for me it went along at a fairly decent pace. So I was. You're right. It could have been a masterpiece. It wasn't that, but it was all right, I thought.
Yep, I'm very pleased with it. I would put this on for pleasure at the drop of a hat, the drop of a peaked cap.
Perhaps we'll move on to the long game and then maybe talk about parallels either while we're doing that or afterwards. Long Game by Russell T Davies, middle of his first run, where he seems to write everything, more or less. Directed by Brian Grant. That's not a name that particularly springs to mind, but...
No.
This is one off.
Do you want me to say something about Brian Grant?
Go on then.
I thought his direction was very impressive. I thought it looked great, and I was waiting for him to come back, and he never did. And he's always been very keen to talk about it. He was on all the commentaries and documentaries and things, but never asked him back. I've no idea why. I don't imagine there's a big story behind that. The other interesting thing that Brian Grant did for this story
Go on then.
is I thought it looks great. I think his camera work's very nice. He does a lot of shooting things through other things. That's the technical term in photography. But also he's turned off that filter, that gauze that the cinematographer, the director of photography, had used in every other episode. I think it's the only episode in these first 13 where he doesn't use it. And I was getting sick of it by this point. There are a lot of people moaning about the look of it, saying it looked like Hollyoaks rather than an expensive science fiction program, which is a slight exaggeration, but I just kind of know what these people meant. This is the first one that didn't for me. Does anyone else know what I'm talking about? They've put the film effect on it. It's just a shot on standard definition videotape.
Yes.
Then they've cut out every other frame to make it look filmy.
Yeah.
But the director of photography has put a particular filter on the lens on every episode of this series to blur it, to blur the picture, soften it. I thought it looked bloody awful. And Brian Grant overruled the director of photography and was allowed to. So apparently it wasn't that important that it was the directors were forced to use it. And that's why I always thought it looks better, sharper, and posher and more expensive than all the other episodes. Because it's not crippled by this strange decision to lower the quality of your picture. So well done Brian Grant for that. But probably shouldn't have been the first lengthy monologue on the subject of the long game, should it? I think we've gone way off topic there, sorry. Should be talking about the story itself, and all I can talk about is the crispness of the image.
To be honest, I agree with you. I think when I watched this one, as usual, not having watched it since it originally went out, all I remembered was people moaning about the long game and how it wasn't all that great a story. But I remember actually quite liking it when I saw it, and I quite liked it this time too. But I did think that shot down of the Earth and the spaceship, that's beautiful. There's some really nice shots both at floor 139 and at floor 500. Yeah, I thought pretty decent job. I mean, you could say maybe the alien is a bit kind of weird looking at the end, but yeah, I'm not going to get too upset about that.
And if it's not getting ahead of ourselves, he assembled a good cast, didn't he?
A fantastic cast, yeah.
Yes, very good indeed.
Giles, do you want to say something before I carry on? Because
it's funny. I know I've always tended to overlook this story because it kind of sits in the middle of an awful lot of stuff that is ostensibly meteor, but then it's also possibly it was arguably the first filler episode that we had. I think it's a bit unfair to retrospectively look on it as a filler episode because at the time we didn't necessarily know. We had like the opening trilogy, which was all setting up, and then we had the Slitheen two-parter, which it's
abomination.
I was going to say it's It has its pluses and its minuses. I was going to be a bit more equivocal than that. But then we'd had Dalek, and obviously then you got this is sandwiched between Dalek and Father's Day, both of which are quite meaty stories. But it's a very serviceable. Yeah, it's a good as a standalone piece of Doctor Who, and especially given that its apparent heritage as something that Russell had written in the 80s as an early pitch to the show, devised the basic idea. It's a perfectly serviceable piece of Doctor Who that could have come out of could really come out of the McCoy kind of era or similar.
It's also one of the few proper bits of arc we get in this first series too, in that it's setting up the conclusion.
Yes.
Is it, Richard? Is it? I'm going to come back to that
Okay.
and make you wish you'd never said it.
Yeah.
No, I don't know, John. So I think you're trying to make excuses for all those people at the time who wrote it off for a variety of spurious reasons. I mean, yes, whether it be coming straight after Dalek, and they thought that Doctor Who's going to be like that every single week. Now we'd reached the heights of Dalek. It's going to be like that. People never thought about filler. People talk about filler episodes now, because Doctor Who's a series. But people never talked about filler stories. When you had 6 4-part stories a series, nobody ever said, well, that one's a filler. Everyone was judged on its own merits.
Yes, yeah.
People never even thought that the 6-part season finale need necessarily be weightier than the others. It was just longer. So I've really missed that. I really missed the days when people didn't have this shorthand way of dismissing. Or when they were reviewing a story, it would automatically start on a lower rung than it needed to because this was a filler one. This didn't contribute to the arc. I missed that.
Yeah.
Very annoying. But people have written it off for so many reasons. That once they found out that Russell had the idea back in the 80s, and it seems to have entered urban legend that it was a Sylvester McCoy story they'd pitched at the time.
I don't think it actually was, though. Wasn't it earlier?
Right. Well, they are.
But yeah, no, it feels like it would fit in.
People thought it felt.
It feels like it would fit in, but.
And there was a hell of a lot of assuming on the part of mostly detractors that it was actually a script that he'd written in the Sylvester McCoy era and had just got out of his drawer and dusted off and just changed the names, which I thought was very silly. People have been saying silly things about Doctor Who for a very long time now, haven't they? I wish they'd stop. It was clearly just, if it was an old idea that he dusted off and repurposed, you don't have to link it to, as he well, clearly Russell thought he needed to link it to the stories that came later on, but I don't think that was because he thought it didn't stand on its own. I don't think he would have viewed this as a filler story that needed justifying by pretending that the Daleks were behind it all later on. I think he only did that when he came up with the wheeze for reusing the sets. It's like saying that the Ark in Space was a bit of filler, but suddenly is worth considering because it links to Revenge of the Cybermen. Oh, the Cybermen were behind it. Oh, well, there you are then. Now I give a shit. And I am going to get on to that point. I think the idea, the retconning, because a writer can retcon their own ideas just a few weeks later. It doesn't have to be done by successive production teams years later. For Russell to say, oh, the Daleks were setting this up, the Daleks installed the mighty Jagrafess of the Holy Hadrojassic Max of Rodenfoe into the top of Satellite 5. It makes no sense whatsoever, and it's just because he's convinced himself that he needs to justify reusing the set. And I really would much rather there'd been no link whatsoever. Because if only, partly because it doesn't make any sense. Why would they do that? Why would the Daleks use a different aliens, whatever? It also fuels the fire of those fans who say, well, this story was rubbish. It was filler. It was trivial and not worth my attention. But now that I know that it had something to do with some Daleks, it suddenly has been elevated in my estimation, which so many people were saying back in 2005. And I hope they've had time to reflect on the banality of their vision.
Yeah.
What this is, you see, it doesn't make any sense, not just through practicality. I mean, if some people think the Daleks employing the Ogrons is a bit silly. There are lots of Daleks. Why the hell do they need Ogrons? But that says nothing to them using a
Pig slave.
What?
Pig slaves.
Yes. Well, quite. Oh well, that's a whole. I could do a whole episode on the stupidity of the Daleks never just being the Daleks, but always having to be. Oh, anyway, no. But this story, to the extent it's about something, it does have its own. It's a satire
Yeah.
on the willingness and gullibility of the public and the willingness to just be intellectually enslaved by media corporations. That's a nice little story.
Yes.
It's the perfect subject matter for a filler episode, or as we used to call them, an episode.
Yeah.
And it doesn't fit with the Daleks. If you say the Daleks are behind all this, it takes all that out. It undercuts that point and just makes it about, they're softening the human population up so they'll be easy to invade. Well, why? They use big old laser cannons to soften people up. They don't use subtle tactics like this. So that always annoyed me, because I enjoyed this story and I thought it stood on its own 2 feet and said something interesting. I like it also. Did you say it's like the first standalone episode? What it is, I was having I had some concerns over the 45-minute format back then, which have never really gone away. I still divide them into ones that are well structured, that make good use of the 45-minute structure, and ones that don't. There's still far too many episodes that have so much setup and so much epilogue that they have hardly any story in the middle.
Yeah.
But this one is paced very nicely. What this one is a traditional Doctor Who story without the padding, without the running around, the escape and getting locked up.
Yeah.
It's taken all that out and it just tells its story economically with the right amount of humour and tension, and it does have a clarity in terms of the overlay of the geography onto the narrative, which Paradise Towers lacks.
Yeah.
Possibly because of its greater length and the need for more padding, if we have to call it that. It's much clearer here that what we need to know about is upwards. That's where we've got to go. Do we want to go there? It sounds a bit dangerous. Are we at the top? No, there's something still above us. It's all very clearly laid out, and I think that keeps us engaged. I mean, you don't. If you can't keep your audience engaged over 45 minutes, I'm not sure you should be writing Doctor Who, but Russell knows how to do it. And this, I've always enjoyed this as possibly his most traditional story. He wrote other standalone episodes that weren't linked to arcs, but never one that felt quite so much just like Doctor Who of the old school. And I'd been perfectly able to see a lot more of it based on this evidence.
It's interesting talking about the standaloniness or otherwise, and the other thing is within the context of the developing first series. Obviously, this is kind of all about Adam, and this is the setup. And it was even called The Companion That Couldn't, or something at one point, wasn't it? And obviously he's there. This is there because we're getting different aspects of Rosa's character, and so on. It's interesting coming to the next episode thing at the end of it, realising that, well, hang on. Yeah, of course, this is kind of setting us up for the fact that Rose is going to encounter the same temptation or a similar temptation the following week, and is also going to
get it worse.
Yeah, get it wrong.
That's fascinating, because if I'd spotted that at the time, that this is leading us directly into Father's Day, I'd forgotten it completely, because watching, as you say, watching that next time, it suddenly became extraordinarily clear. And that's very clever. What a thickie if I didn't see that 15 years ago. But I was wondering if there is a weakness. I was thinking that the Adam plot often feels quite separate. Or it's almost the equivalent of Mel's elder C up to the swimming pool. He excuses himself and goes off and has his own little storyline, which only comes back in fairly close to the end. And on my first watch, I was thinking, is that a sign that that's an afterthought? But of course it could be the opposite. It's the flip side of that. If the main thing Russell wanted to do was tell the story of the companion who couldn't, then what he needed as a framework for that was a nice, simple, standalone story. That, I mean, if you take out the Adam stuff, there's probably about half an hour of plot left. So maybe that's why he thought this one was suitable in his draw.
Well, apparently that was...
He maybe thought it couldn't stand on its own, and it would only work if he added a B plot, which is actually the thing he's most interested in exploring.
Well, apparently that was the case. That's because it was also called Adam, and I am reading here thanks to the trusty Fulcrum.
Oh, you could have had people You could have people fooled into thinking that
No, it's,
your enormous brain was already
if only.
holding all
But
this
on the
information.
apparently there was an earlier draft of the script in which Adam's father had a disease that was incurable, and that was driving Adam's motivation to find out about and to bring stuff back from the future potentially.
I mean, did he cut that for time, or because he didn't think Adam, or did he think making Adam more sympathetic would have undercut the point? Because of course, if he'd gone for that,
that would
much
really
closer
have,
to
yes,
makes it much closer to what happens with Rose next week. She has a good excuse, whereas here, what we're left with in the ultimate version is Adam just being selfish, and what he's using time travel not as an excuse to enrich himself and enlarge his mind, but to make a bit of money. What's in it for me? It's the first instinct he has, the first place he goes. So it's rather slates his character, doesn't it? No going back from that.
I mean, the truth to me is that Eccleston's Doctor, Ninth Doctor, just doesn't like Adam. He doesn't like him at the start. He doesn't like him at the end.
No,
and he finds a good excuse for dumping him. It feels sort of little more than that to me.
And how does Adam end up in Utah in 2012? Is it Utah? Can anyone remember what the character's set up in Dalek?
Something like that.
A whiz kid.
Yeah,
because obviously he's hanging around this big. Yeah,
there's not a lot of continuity between these two stories, is there?
I was just wondering whether there was some indication in his reason for being on Van Statten's base.
Yeah, he's a sort of clever, prodigious kid. I think.
I think maybe his arc would have been better remembered if it had at least 3 episodes, I think, so people got to know him a bit better. But he's always, he's a bit introduced in a rather half-hearted way in Dalek, isn't he? I'm not saying that Russell or Rob did a bad job writing him, but there's a lot of other stuff going on, and so we can't help but be a bit frustrated when we go back to this idiot when we want to be watching the all-new Dalek. Anyway, whatever. There's no point in discussing what might have been.
I find it interesting that in this story the Doctor treats Rose and Adam like the kids. He gives them 50p to go off to the pictures and buy a bag of sweets while he gets on and talks to the adults. And it's very different from Rose's character even later in this series, but certainly in the following one.
Well, it certainly cements his view that Rose has got the right stuff. This is, if nothing else comes out of this, he's absolutely convinced that he keeps pointing to her as the model of what a companion should be.
Yes. Which
he'll do a lot more of course. We'd be doing the same to Martha a couple of years later, but the less said about that, the better.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if Russell wrote this in the 80s, it might have been about newspapers.
Yeah.
And now it's about cable news because that's the sort of 2005 thing. A rolling news anyway. But, it's nicely done. Good.
I still can't quite get my head around what the mighty Jagrafest of the Holy Hadrojassic Max of Rodenvo is supposed to represent. Is it just an over... I mean, I seem to remember at one point thinking it was Robert Maxwell, like a big bloated newspaper tycoon living on the top floor, but maybe that's just my own...
Yeah, I think that or Rupert Murdoch, I think you could see it as that.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking more of the physicality of Robert Maxwell, but I think that would have been a bit beneath Russell to make a fat joke like that.
In the early 80s?
It's not entirely clear, is it? Because he's not Max. It's not clear what Max's plan is. Is he representing the other Jagrafesses? Do they have an end game? And don't try and convince me that this is always the Daleks are always supposed to be behind this. That's not true.
No.
What are they? What is the Jagrafess up to? What's he softening humanity up for? Just for a laugh?
Well, it's a financial thing, isn't it?
Well, yes, yes, there are two sides to it, aren't there? The banks are funding the Jagrafess. Yes, I mean it's not a particularly deep satire on the media, but the banking element comes in.
He's a fat capitalist that sits on the top.
Yes, I suppose
really.
So. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's just a representation of the facelessness of the capitalist classes. I think it would have been better if he hadn't been, if it had just been some sort of unique creature that had evolved out of humanity's own stupidity. The more gullible and hypnotised they become, the bigger the Jagrafess grows. And maybe you can read that version of it. It seems to be an end to itself rather than a means to an end. That's the impression I get.
I mean, also, Kathika is perhaps the better companion than Rose, because Rose just ends up getting captured, and, you know, if it isn't for Kathika, then they don't get rescued.
I was watching it this time thinking, if the Doctor's in the market for trying out new companions, he should take her with him.
Yeah,
at
yeah.
the end. But she clearly passes the test. She picks up on all his very subtle cues at the end.
Indeed.
Talking about the great cast, this was the first time I ever clapped eyes on Anna Maxwell Martin. Oh dear, my life has never been the same since. Simon Pegg, though.
Yeah.
Now he's a major Hollywood film star. People look at this and think, why did you waste Simon Pegg in a little part like this? But A, he wasn't that Simon Pegg back then, was he?
No.
But also, it's a very good part for him, and he really nails it. Gets every ounce of a bite out of that dialogue. And he looks great, with his white hair and beard. It's a good look for him. You should go back to that.
And, you know, a nice bit of work with Tamsin Gregg as well. Just as you're sort of, you know, thinking there can't be any more really good cast members in this, surely.
Now, you two have done a lot of research. Now, is my memory... Now, her scenes stand out, don't they? They're completely separate from everything else. And I have this feeling that they were added in later in the way in which a lot of supplementary filming was done in this first season because episodes were underrunning. Am I right about that, or am I getting confused?
It looks like it could have...
Because I know there various other stories had whole characters introduced, just like famously in End of the World, you know, characters that were just one-scene characters that are just there to fill up time. But is she or isn't she one of those?
Well, the way it's filmed...
It sounds half plausible, but I don't know.
I don't know, the way it's filmed, it looks like it, as you say, it looks like it could have been, because she's only there with Bruno Langley. But on the other hand, that is the... Given what we were saying about the driving force of the plot being Adam's story, and the fact that she's the one that installs the brain flap, which is fairly integral to everything else.
Would have to have been there. Those scenes would have to have been there, even if they weren't at quite that length. Maybe what I'm remembering is thinking this is going on a bit. I mean, it's all very good stuff, but they are longer than they need to be, those scenes, aren't they?
Yeah, it's quite fun. It's quite fun, though. I like the way he keeps on making excuses and she keeps on demolishing his excuses.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, he starts out being very anti the whole surgery aspect, and then he's very anti it at the end as well, but somehow he gets talked into it in the middle.
Nobody ever seems to have been very interested in revisiting the character of Adam, do they? Do you think it's...
What, do you see it as a big finished box set?
Well, you know, you finally have that Adam is Davos could actually be a become a real thing.
I was wondering if anyone was going to bring that
the wonders
up. That's of fake rumours from 21st Century Doctor Who. That was one of the best because it actually made some sort of sense. I'd like to point out I never fell for it, obviously, but I'd like a parallel universe version where he becomes Davros. I think that's an Elseworld story that is worth telling. No, but I think it's a shame that most people just think, at best, well, his story's been done, there's nothing to add to it, and at worst, why on earth would we want to go back to him again? Because I think there are lots of different angles you would take with him. And he's not in Corrie anymore. I'm sure I'd be grateful. Have you noticed that I've got through this entire review without saying something along the lines of, for a middling filler story, this is much better than anything we've had in the last 2 seasons of Doctor Who.
Well, there it is.
Openers and well, we get that.
Well, understandably, when you've got Russell knocking it out, it's different.
It's kind of traditional. It's traditional to say. I never thought much about this at the time, but I really appreciate it in hindsight.
But I think the difference is that with this one, we appreciated it at the time, and we appreciate it now. I mean,
we did. Yeah, us 3.
So how about those parallels then? I mean, clearly that there's something about getting to the top in each of the settings.
Yes, ish. I think. Did we get to the bottom of whether or not that's slightly fudged in Paradise Towers? Because it's nice and clear here. There's no, is the point of the story to get to the basement or the summit in his story? It's all about up.
Well, I guess the difference in this is everyone wants to get to the top floor, whereas in Paradise Towers it's really only Mel who's desperate to do that.
Yeah. And of course, because it's metaphorical.
Mm.
It's metaphorical and also literal in the sense that anybody who's worked in a big company will know that getting to the top... You don't expect a swimming pool. You expect the CEO's executive suite, don't you?
But the sad truth about any corporation is you just end up working for somebody else, even if you are the CEO. As with Simon Pegg, there's always someone bigger and uglier telling you what to do. I mean, Simon Pegg, I guess, maybe shows Richard Briers the way forward in terms of a rather more subtle performance in the role of chief caretaker.
Or you could argue, in terms of people whose characters die and then carry on in some sort of zombie form, that Anna Maxwell Martin shows Richard Briers the way forward. She doesn't say a bloody word after she's dead, but she's still... But I believe it. I've always enjoyed her last little contribution to making sure that Simon Pegg gets his just desserts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah, I've written Zombies down as another parallel. Yeah.
Well done.
I think also, I mean, clearly you've got potentially old Jagrafess is the Croagnon of this story. They're both the pets or the masters, whichever way you look at it, of the guy who's apparently in charge. Adam, you could say, is, well, I don't know, is he an equivalent for Pex? Not really. They've got they have a different trajectory. I suppose they're both somewhat tragic figures in the end.
I like the gratuitous use of skeletons in the long game. Is it even explained what that circle of dead people is there for, apart from to give us a cheap thrill? It's very good. I like a nice skull bursting into view unexpectedly. It's the Scooby-Doo fan in me.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, that you've got the newsgatherers on floor 139, and then you've got a similar setup on floor 500, although it hasn't gone so well up there.
No.
And what are the zombies doing? They're just there to... They're the sort of final edit, are they, of everything else that's happening elsewhere? Are we up in the gallery here?
I suppose, satirically, the biggest point this story makes is that the entirety of this vast 96 billion strong human empire has become not just ossified, but it's dumbed down. The Doctor is expecting to see the pinnacle of human culture and civilization, and it's just people eating Kronkburgers. So I guess it's saying that if we take our eyes off the ball and start believing everything we're fed by the media, in inverted commas, then we'll regress in the same way.
Although isn't that cut across RTD though? I mean, isn't he the sort of guy who would be quite happy to feed people Kronkburgers?
Well,
he's not really elitist, is he?
I mean, to the extent that it's a message, it's a very old-fashioned Marxist point of view, Frankfurt School and all those sorts of fellas. And I don't think it's really what Russell believes. He loves... he's full of contradictions, and he'll be the first to admit that. He loves the modern world. He loves the media, high and low culture, and I think the point is more putting all your eggs in one basket, allowing one media conglomerate directed by one vision, one mind, one perspective to dominate. It's not a problem, it's not a criticism of the story that the message isn't entirely clear, because it's a 45-minute episode of Doctor Who, so you don't really expect to find the meaning of life in it.
We don't get that much. We don't get to see that much of the product, though, do we?
No.
No, I mean, the few news reports we see early on are actually their scene setting to show us that this world isn't the utopia that the Doctor thinks it's going to be.
Yeah.
Especially, including the voiceover reference to Bad Wolf.
Yes.
Like most of them inserted late in the day.
I think because the one that struck me most, really, in terms of actually insinuating what's been going on, was Kathika's thing about when they say, well, where are the aliens? Why are they just humans here? And she trots out a list of reasons / excuses why Earth is appearing somewhat more homogeneous than it should.
Yeah, there'd have been a Brexit joke now, wouldn't there?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Sorry, I have to bring it up. Well, it struck me, but obviously, yeah.
Another parallel that occurs to me is that the Doctor becomes the mentor for the Kangs in the Court of Paradise Towers, and he's also, as we've already discussed, acting as something of a mentor in this to Kathaka.
Yeah. And through just that one person, he's affecting, hopefully, we assume, change for the whole of this society in a trickle-down effect. So he has done a sort of McCoy thing. He's popped in, and in the space of an afternoon, he's fixed a civilization that just needed to push back in the right direction.
Yes, and then not stuck around to clear up the mess.
If you take the Daleks out of it, which obviously you don't have to because they're not in it, it's like the best of the late classic series in that it's not filler, it's the Doctor doing what he's best at, popping into any random situation and tweaking it. It doesn't always need to be saving the universe.
No. Well, often better when it isn't. Because, how many times can you actually want to save the whole universe in the course of a season? And it's kind of hard to understand what it means anyway. If you think about Logopolis, it's all just a little bit hard to fathom.
Well, once in a while.
Yeah.
It's the year 200,000.
Yeah.
He's wisely gone way beyond our Doctor Who Programme Guide volume, to whichever book it was, that first put everything in order, constructed a timeline, and he's thought, well, rather than trying to squeeze something into these tiny little gaps, I'll just leapfrog way over them, which is a very good point.
Still got a long way for the face of Bow to go, though, hasn't it? From 200,000 to 5 billion.
Yeah.
But yes, no, I agree. It's so far in the future.
Are these the only two stories that involve a large, high-rise building?
Well, there's the one that there's the Bells of St. Johnny goes driving up on the outside of one. I don't know.
No. So I suppose, stories that are set entirely within
yeah, indeed.
a large... This one's cheating because it's in space, so you can't really think about what's outside it. I'm still tantalised by the world in which Paradise Towers is set. I reckon there's a story in there. Stephen White's recently written a prequel to Great Show in the Galaxy, The Psychic Circus for Big Finish, so I think his next project should be exploring. What happened... Of course, the problem with that is it'll be all about the men who went off to war. I forgot to mention that it was... Well, Andrew Cartmell's claims that having the Kangs as girl gang was his idea.
I thought you were going to say that Stephen Wyatt's prequel is going to be called The Second Greatest Show in the Galaxy. But that would be anticlimactic, wouldn't it?
A bit like this podcast. We're winding down.
Yeah.
I hope you saved a really good point to finish on, so that we can go on a high, so that we can build this podcast high for happiness.
I think you've done it.
Oh, was that it? Effortless.
Have I got anything else to say about this? Well, I mean, I've got one more thing to say about this, but I don't think it's building to a high. But I just like the way that at the start of this, rather like Crocodile Dundee, the Doctor gives Rose a whole load of information, which she then uses in front of Adam as if she's somehow, assessed the situation and knows exactly what's going on. Because old Croc, he looks at his watch and then he looks up at the sun and says, it must be about 2:30 or whatever. So this is a similar kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think we've reached that point in the podcast where we're going to start mentioning all things we forgot to mention earlier and really disrupting the flow. I can't believe when I was talking about the ways in which Paradise Towers is scuppered by its production values, I didn't mention the music, which really is shocking, isn't it? So when I was watching it this time, I watched the first episode with Kev McCulloch's score, and then I switched to the alternative one, which is, while not a masterpiece, is pleasingly, well, by comparison, it's less distracting. Have you heard it?
I have not actually listened to this.
I assume Richard can't have done, as he hasn't watched the story in 30 years.
No, I watched it on BritBox.
Yeah.
No, so I didn't get any alternate tracks.
The original score is very early 80s. It can't be. This David Snell, whatever his name is, must have been familiar with early 80s Who. Is a bit Paddy Kingsland with undertones of Roger Limb. Not as good as either of them. I can see why they might have rejected it, because it's not great, but it's better than what Kev McCulloch came up with.
There's a couple of nice themes in the Kev McCulloch score.
You think?
I think there's a couple of nice little moments. That a bit of running down corridors, music at a couple of points.
There are nice themes in his work, but for me, it's unlike anybody else who's ever composed for Doctor Who, with the possible exception of Kerry Blyton. It just doesn't feel like Doctor Who music to me. It just feels like Stock Aitken and Waterman. I find it very, very distracting.
I think the issue is that some of the things that I thought, okay, there's a possibly nice thing there. It's just is used once and then discarded and doesn't return again. So there's no real sense of it being any kind of coherent score. Most of it is just random bits of music put together to fill dead air.
You had a week to write it, so if that was the only reason that it was rubbish, then I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But I don't like the work he produced.
I was going to say, unfortunately, I think the fact that, judging by his score's another thing. It's of its time, isn't it? Really.
It just feels to me like classic, McCoy incidental music. So I didn't really notice it that much.
Oh crumbs! Okay, well you've gone native.
Yeah, well, it's just what I expected to hear.
I don't mind the stuff that's going on when the caretakers are going around and being nobbled and so on. There's just like the undertone thing that's going on with a bit of faux guitar or whatever going on in the background.
Been haunted by the extraordinary tune he uses under shots of the cleaning machines charging down corridors. It's been going around in my head all week. Which is not a good thing. It's catchy in its drum machine a go-go style, but no, it's not very. It's not dramatic in the right way, or conducive to creating an atmosphere. Conducive to creating a headache. Well, I'm so sorry to have. I sound like a right old misery, and I shouldn't have ended. Can you edit this bit in earlier on? So we can end on a high.
Sure. Well, we'll bring this farrago to a close, and we'll see what will happen in the edit. I think. But in the meantime, it's been very nice talking to you about these two stories that we've quite enjoyed. In fact, we very much enjoyed one of them and quite enjoyed the other.
Indeed.
I think.
Yep. What a pleasant surprise. Are we making a habit of this, dipping back into stories that we lesser celebrated stories, and finding new reasons to enjoy them? Did we do that last time?
We did, rather.
Yes, we did.
Yes, yeah.
We did. Yeah. Yes. Let's stick to that then. Let's forget all these big important stories. Make this the underdog championing podcast.
The only downside to that was your suggestion that we perhaps look at Talons and Unicorn as a pair, because it was the
Chris Benjamin box set.
Benjamin one.
You haven't finished. We haven't finished this one yet. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go on, do your bit. Do your bit. You were nearly there.
Okay, so thanks both of you for joining me on this and for the fun chat we've had, and we look forward to doing it again sometime soon.
Yeah, it's great.
Absolutely.
We enjoyed that.
Goodbye, everybody.
Yeah, thanks.
Sorry if I was overcritical. I don't mean it. I love everything and everyone except you.
Bye, everyone.
Overcritical? Nah.
Podcast rating system. It's working flat out, channeling massive amounts of bot traffic. Oh, it's you.
The podcast rating system is working flat out, channeling massive amounts of bot traffic.
All the way. Yeah, that's how I did it.
Happy with
Which
that.
fictional northern county was I channeling there? I've no idea. And you won't know, will you? Which which would you be most upset to hear that I was aiming for?
It sounded like somewhere between Manchester and Liverpool. I would say you're probably Cheshire.
Yeah? I thought there was too much Yorkshire in there. I kept slipping back into by gum. It's terrible, isn't it? Anyway, never mind all that. I could have brought my wife on. She's a big fan of High Rise.
Oh, okay.
Only because it has Tom Hiddleston in it.
Oh, right.
She says she's read the book as well.
Okay,
Sorry.
come on then.
Would you like to come on and tell us?
Get a critique.
I'll go and interview her and we can edit that bit in later. Do you mean Graham Harper?
Sorry, yes. I do mean Graham Harper.
Say it again.
Sorry.
Do it again.
Okay. And perhaps you had someone like, sometimes you had someone like Graham Williams who could... Don't say it. And sometimes you had someone like Graham Harper who could be... I think we found our outtake for the end, haven't we?